process.
Well, now it's time for a chat with MSPs at the Scottish Parliament. Joining me today are Ivan McKee from the SNP, Adam Tompkins from the Conservatives, Labour's Jenny Mara and Andy Whiteman from the Scottish Greens. Well, Ivan McKee, first of all, I'm not quite sure I understood what was being said there. The implication seemed to be that after Brexit there might not be any such thing as European arrest warrants, and that someone like Carla Ponsati might not be liable to extradition unless there was some sort of new bilateral extradition agreement between Britain and Spain. Was that your understanding of what was said there?
I think you're asking the wrong person there, and there's two separate things here. We'll talk about the situation with Spain in a minute, but as far as the European arrest warrant process is concerned, that will depend on what happens with the Brexit negotiations the UK government is undertaking at the moment. But in terms of the substance of the issue, we've got a ridiculous situation where the Spanish government, instead of going through a political process and engaging with the Catalan government, is taking the option of trying to lock up democratically elected politicians and throw the key away, which frankly is a ridiculous behaviour. And I've just come from the court in Edinburgh where I witnessed Clara Ponsati gaining bail, and she'll be back in April for a full hearing. So we hope very much that sense will prevail and that, this attempt to extradite what is effectively on a political basis is not upheld.
Right. Just to be clear, though, you say they want to lock them up and throw away the key. They want to put them on trial in Spain under a judicial process in a democratic country. That's not quite the same thing.
You can't have a law that says people aren't allowed to vote. That's nonsense. And you can't pretend, hide behind the constitution that was set up in the aftermath of Franco to pretend that that's in some way democratic. The people of Catalonia have got a right to make a decision on whether they want to be independent or not, the same way as the people in Scotland had, and the Spanish government aren't allowing that to happen. And they had an election in December, and they elected these people to run Catalonia. Right, okay. But notwithstanding that, they want to throw them into jail. It's not democratic, and it's ridiculous.
Adam Tompkins, what do you make of this?
Well, I think that the Spanish Constitution, which dates from 1978, is much more recent than the British Constitution. The Spanish Constitution deals with questions of secession and separation very differently from the way in which the British Constitution deals with it. And the British Constitution deals with these things through a political process, which is why in 2014 David Cameron, the Prime Minister, said it was perfectly okay for the Scottish to have their independence referendum, which of course we all had. The Spanish Constitution deals with these things differently. The Spanish Constitution is based very much on a rule of law approach to the questions of secession, and I think that the rule of law must be respected. That's what the European arrest warrant system is based on: international, pan-European respect for the rule of Spanish constitutional law. It may very well be that Clara Ponsati has committed offences in Spain that would not be offences in the United Kingdom, but it's not UK law that pertains to the question of the legality of Catalan separatists. It's Spanish constitutional law, and Spanish constitutional law must, in the international name of the rule of law, be upheld and respected.
Okay, hang on a second. Let Jenny Mara have a chance. Jenny Mara, I'm not quite sure what Labour's attitude is to this.
I think, I don't disagree with what Ivan McKee said. I think the Spanish government has taken an extremely heavy-handed approach right through this process. We thought the Catalan people should have been allowed to determine their own future. That is, a human right. It's a democratic freedom. I think this situation is very unfortunate that the Spanish government have felt they've had to resort to a European arrest warrant. I think politics exists in the space between the law and what people want. And I think it's really incumbent on EU leaders now, and it's perhaps a bit fruitless for us in a Brexit country to be saying that. But I think the power of the EU must exist here, and leaders must come together and really put pressure on the Spanish government to see some sort of sense prevail in this. Because did we really expect ourselves to be in a situation where democratically elected leaders arrest warrants were being issued? I think it's a very unfortunate situation.
All right. Andy Whiteman, what do you make of it?
Well, the whole Catalan situation, there have been questions about the legitimacy of the referendum, been questions about the referendum, about whether the Catalan people want independence. Those are all political questions. And what's very, very regrettable is that the Spanish government has chosen to use the system of European arrest warrants to attempt to use the criminal law in place of what should be a political process to resolve quite deep-seated political differences between some Catalan politicians and the Spanish state, between some...
But how would you reply to the point that I think Adam Tompkins was alluding to, that if that someone from the Spanish government who might say to you, look, we respect your opinions and they're all terribly interesting, Mr. Whiteman, but thank you very much. We will decide in Spain what the Spanish constitution is. And if people break the laws which arise from that constitution or allegedly break them, we'll pursue them in the court. So while we're interested in what you're saying, it's not really very relevant.
Well, that's true, and if Clara Ponseti does return to Spain, then that's what will happen. The question immediately before us, of course, is whether a sheriff in Edinburgh, faced with a request under the European arrest warrant, agrees that she should be extradited. And that is a matter that has to take its course, and that is a matter in which questions around politics and human rights will, I am sure, be engaged in the court.
Look, we're slightly getting out of time, and I wanted to ask you, let's stay with you, Andy Whiteman, and ask you about this Auditor General report into social security. I mean, there's a sort of common theme emerging in a lot of these reports, isn't it, which is they say not necessarily the ideas being pursued by the Scottish Government are bad, but that they're not being planned out properly, that we don't know how they're supposed to succeed, and the finances aren't being put in place.
Well, Auditor General plays a really, really important part in Scottish politics. She plays a really, really important part in helping us as MSPs scrutinise the executive and make sure we're getting good value for public money we're spending. And quite rightly, she has drawn attention to risks. And I don't think anyone was ever going to suggest that would not be risks in setting up a new system in Scotland governing social security. That's something we haven't done before, so clearly there are risks, and she's highlighted some of them, and it's really up to all of us as MSPs to make sure that those risks are addressed properly and hold the Scottish Government to account and make sure that this is a success.
Okay, Jenny Mara, Labour has not been taking quite such a charitable attitude, have they?
Well, I chair the Parliament's Audit Committee, and you're right, there are themes that keep coming out. Workforce planning is one of them, and the Auditor General said today that they're going to struggle to find enough of the people to do the work that is required. But she also says that the Scottish Government has found that this was going to cost more than they initially budgeted for. I think anyone could have guessed that setting up this whole new system was going to cost more money. But the key thing is the Scottish Government isn't doing their business planning. We saw this a couple of weeks ago with their childcare report. They didn't do any business planning about what their policy was and if it would have the required effects. I think the government has a responsibility to do their planning, get the evidence, and then start to implement their policies.
Adam Tompkins, briefly, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important point here is that the UK government has already given the Scottish government £200 million to help set up the new Scottish Social Security Agency. That money appears in the Audit Scotland report today, already to have been spent, and the agency doesn't even exist. The money is being poured down a black hole by Jean Freeman, the Social Security Minister. There is very little accountability for all the work, admirable work that Jenny and her committee do on the public audit front. There is very little direct accountability of this to the Scottish Parliament. I have asked questions about this of the Cabinet Secretary and of various ministers, and you never get an answer. What we do know, however, is that Scottish Social Security is being set up in a deliberately expensive way with inadequate accountability to the Scottish Parliament for value of taxpayers' money.
Ivan McKee, money going down a black hole.
If you actually read the report instead of listening to the sound bites, the report says that the agency is making good progress, the bill's going through on time, there's adequate risk management processes in place, and that the first benefits will be delivered on time. So all of that is positive. On the issue of money, what it clearly states is what we've known all along, and none of this is news. The agency is going to cost just over £300 million to set up. The UK government is only contributing £200 million of that, and the Scottish government has the other money ready to invest in it. So there's nothing happening here that is unexpected. There's nothing happening here that's out of control.
We've got time for a quick
on time,
yes
on budget,
or no.
working fine.
We've got time for pretty much a yes or no response on the debate this afternoon. Let's start with you, Ivan, on will the Scottish Government reject the Green proposal to get rid of council tax?
The Scottish Government is open to listen to ideas and will progress forward and listen to what people have got to say on the best way to reform local government finances, which is always under review.
That was a sentence almost entirely devoid of meaning. Would you like to have another go at it?
No, the Scottish Government, at the moment we've got the system we've got, and we're not planning to change that just now. But we are listening to proposals and to see if there's something better that people come up with, but so far nobody has.
Adam Tompkins, is there a case for getting rid of council tax?
What there is a case for is much more local autonomy over tax raising in Scotland generally. We think LBTT and business rates should be be devolved from this Parliament to local authorities in Scotland. We want local authorities to take much more responsibility for the money that they
Jenny
spend
Mara,
by devolving
quickly.
tax.
I've looked at the amendments. The Tories and SNP are in cahoots to shut down this discussion. That's clear to me this afternoon, to have this discussion on tax. Neither of these parties want it. And I think the proposal from the Greens to open it up is a good one.
Do you want to get rid of the council tax? You haven't answered it. Yes or no?
Yes, Labour's proposal is to get rid of the council
All right,
tax. The
and
SNP
Andy Whiteman,
promised the same 10 years
we're nearly
ago.
out of time. I'm guessing your answer is a yes.
Scrap it.
Scrap
Yes.
it. Right, we'll leave it all there. Thank you all very much indeed. It won't happen, will it? Do you think it will?
It won't happen. I mean, it was